You've got there on your screen, I think some of the American teams are close up to the boat, but also one of the Danish teams closer into the pin. So that's the spread of the fleet. But you can see those boats sailing down, trying to find that gap. The guys in that second row will really be hunting to try to get their bow up into that front line of these boats.
So coming up to 20 seconds to go, it is the first racing of the Gold Fleet here of the Nacra 17. In that final count, boats are back behind the line. They're not pushing as hard as they obviously did in the first start. So it is race 7. Finals are underway.
Huge amount of space for the Japanese team down there. They're only in the middle of the line. You can see how compacted the fleet is. They're all fighting up for that boat end. So these bottom 3 boats have a bit of space to put their bow down and get the speed up for this Nacra class.
Yeah, pace is everything. Norwegian boat sticking its bow forward initially to lure to them. We've got NZL 4.
Yeah, that's Gemma Jones and Josh Porepsky. These guys have had a real shake up the Kiwis, mixing up all of their combinations for the teams. So everyone here is a little bit fresh if they're in New Zealand, and a new combination. So they're still kind of getting used to each other. So right now we're reading that Bruin and Randall are off in the lead for the start, but obviously just off the start line it's really hard to judge who's in the right place and who's stuck their nose forward. We're starting to see a few of the boats tack off, obviously fighting for that right-hand side, and that would be, it's quite reading considering how many boats we're trying to get up to that boat end for the start line.
Yeah, the finding a lane is so important, getting off the line clean, finding a lane that you can use the full power. Conditions-wise, we've got to believe about 16 knots from the southeast, predominantly flat water here in Geelong, and we'll just let this mature a bit. And what's really noticeable in the Nacra class is you get this left and right group minimising the tacks up towards the bottom third, but it's still a bit of a waiting game. Down to leeward we've got Japan, then there's New Zealand and Norway.
Yesterday we had a big conversation with Nathan and Haley Outeridge about foiling upwind, and they had a beat yesterday where about a pack of 5 of them put the bow down, got foiling upwind, got back up to everyone's line and moved to the front of the fleet. And Nathan was saying that there's a bunch of teams that are a little bit nervous about making that move, and it pays off in spades if you can do it right. And they moved right up to the top of the fleet, and he said he looked behind him and other people were trying it too, but not successfully. It's
a bit hard to try something new at a World Championships, and that's why these guys kind of try to come to a regatta armoured with a little top secret advantage that they can bring into the racing. Just to keep you updated on who's out to that right hand pack, the fleet's nearly split 50-50 now, half on port tack, half on starboard tack, with the Austrians, Austrian number 3, Zach and Mats. They will be leading the pack as it stands right now in the right-hand side.
Yeah, Zajac and Mats look to, certainly from the animation, to be in a strong position, but it's still early, and of course with the animation, the further the gauge or the separation is between that left and right group, it only takes a little bit of pressure on either side of the course, pressure or a slight wind shift, and we'll see a reshuffling of the pack. But early on it's Zajac and Mats in Austria 3.
And you can get a good perspective of it there up on your screen. We've got our overlap of what is going on, so you can see where these guys are positioned on the course. Only early days, these guys will be coming into that top mark eventually, and that's when you find out who's picked the correct side, who's gambled, who's leveraged out, and how that's going to play out.
So down to leeward, this is in the group that are on the left-hand side, Japan and New Zealand. But way up to windward of them, you can see boats quite a long way bow forward. Chris, earlier on you were down on the dock. What was the sort of the chatter around the pre-departure? Much nerves on the beach?
Yep. Over the last 2 days, the grass has been a big issue. We've been having big breezes out of the east earlier in the week, and it was really shook up the results. Some people were just unlucky, or some people were jumping their boats out of the water or stopping and backing down in the middle of a race. And so it was even on Vittorio's mind, one of the Italian teams, Bissaro, even this morning, trying to figure out techniques to get the grass off. The grass is kind of abating now, but it's kind of stuck in the sailors' mind. So unfortunately, they've been talking a lot about it. So you may see some techniques with someone backing down in the middle of the race. But as far as the breeze is concerned, I think everyone's just happy to get on with it. They're listening to their media reports, and I think the only nerves that we really saw were with the teams that are going for selection, particularly the Italians.
Well, and I think the US team had gone for selection as we go on board here with Riley Gibbs and Anna Weiss.
Yeah, the Americans won the Oceania champs, which are basically the pre-worlds, and then they haven't been doing quite as well. The Riley Gibbs and Anna Weiss. The previous couple days, you'll see here that Parent and Atwood are right up there with them. So the two American teams have been pushing each other. The one thing I wanted to ask Nina about is the Parent and Atwood are a very small team. Have we figured out that there's not necessarily a huge benefit to being a big, tall lever like in the other classes?
Well, as the equipment's all changed from the Rio Olympics, and so these guys are still trying to figure out the best combination, and it may not be a one-size-fits-all, so to speak, with different people's techniques and how they sail the boat. They really make the boat work for them, I guess. You saw there on board with Gibbs and Weiss that the skipper was doing most of the balancing, and he's coming in off the wire sooner, and the crew is doing the main sheet. And so that kind of juggle, we're still seeing different combinations, male-female, skippering or crewing, but also different division of the roles, doing the main sheet, or if they're adjusting the board rake. So I think that is what makes this racing so exciting, is the fact that everyone's doing it a little bit differently. Everyone's got their boats set up a little bit differently, and we don't quite know the magic formula just yet. Obviously, the Italians have been in incredible form leading into this event. They've always put in a strong performance, and they've won the last 2 World Championships. But right now, as it stands, we've got Vittorio in 4th place, but we're seeing the English, the Aussies are always quite strong, and the French, who have popped into the top 3 positions right now.
So you see how they heeled up, and that wasn't necessarily a puff. That could have been a look to clear the weather dagger board and rudder. That's one of the techniques that they've been talking about for clearing weeds.
It's difficult. These guys have winglets on their rudder. They can't just reach back and get it. They can't just lift their centerboards up and get them out. So these guys are being really quite inventive on how to get the weed.
The nice little push here from the USA team. They just a little bit of rudder elevator assist going on. You can see that the boat is just using a little bit of upward force from the rudder to lift that leeward hull to reduce the displacement. Crew weight for a Nacra 17, that's the combined crew rate, between 135 and 140 kilos, and the boats are very weight sensitive. But they don't have the adjustable range that some of the other foiling boats have. To the extreme, you look at some of them, the New America's Cup boats where they have adjustable elevators and trim tabs. These boats, that elevator on the rudder is locked in. So then you've got to figure out, what mode do I want to be in? And what we saw in Auckland at the Worlds is predominantly they sail a foil assist mode, not a semi-displacement mode on the upwind, so that the foil setup is set up for downwind to go full foiling, and of course that's when they reach substantial speed. So the tuning of the foils is such a big component in the Nacra 17.
Yes, and the adjustment of they have an adjustment to rake the foils forward and back, the dagger boards. But like Nathan told us yesterday, Nathan Outeridge, was that's just a course adjustment. All the rest of the adjustment is done by the crew, so they're not necessarily sitting there playing the angle of that dagger board.
The athleticism of and we'll see it on the downwind of the forward hand to actually keep the angle of attack of the dagger board. Mm-hmm. The elevator component is one of the key components, and it's a real revelation to watch. But we're still heading up leg 1. This is race 7, Gold Fleet, first race of the day here in Geelong.
And we're seeing a bit of a condensing of the fleet now. We're coming up to that top third, and that's where really we see how everyone's, the angles that they're sailing or the direction that they've taken on the course and how it's all shaping up. Right now, I honestly cannot pick it looking at the tracker. You can see there on your screen, these guys are super even. That we've seen a few wind shifts going up here, but generally the racing is super tight. A little bit of a standout, Newberry and Lindbergh, USA 50. They seem to just have their nose ahead. You can see them on the screen there. If they can get a few crosses in, as they do attack. They could just have a slight edge. They've kind of played the centre, those guys.
Yeah, they have, and they're nicely in the centre of the course, and they've... I think the breeze is on and off pressure-wise and directions. It's still early in the day. What are we coming up to? 16 minutes past 11. But it does look like that group in the middle of the course, and the USA team there of Newbury and Leadenberg.
It's nice to see some new countries up forward too, not the usual suspects. We have the second Argentinian team to Santi and Cecilia up there. We have a Greek team up there. Obviously the Americans are moving their way up the leaderboard in the last couple events. But it's nice to get to know some of these other countries. It gives us a tip to find them on the beach and find out who they are and what they're doing differently.
Well, I think with the Nacra 17, with the rule change after Rio, and there was quite big change in the construction of the boats and certainly the foil package under the water, it's like a redistribution of the deck chairs, isn't it? And we've seen some quite big changes, although I'd be very surprised if the Italian combination of Bizzarro and Frescari don't really come to the fore. They were certainly a class act in the final series in Auckland.
So right now we're seeing a little bit of a left shift coming through the fleet here. So those boats that are on port tack have got a really nice angle, making it super difficult for the boats on starboard, just folding a little bit from that side that they've picked. And that's making those teams quite strong. USA 50, Argentina 29 and Austria 391 are really going to benefit. You can see them on your screen there. Benefit with that lovely angle from that left shift. It is crowded. In the mid fleet here, these guys are, you can see them constantly in the back of the screen there, ducking, weaving. It's a dogfight trying to find a little bit of clear air and find your way to that ley line.
Yeah, it looks like the leading boats are on final approach on starboard.
The breeze has lightened up quite a bit, and at first I was just about to say these flat waters on Port Phillip Bay, it's a really well-known, great foiling place for flat water and big breeze, but you can see it's really puffy right now, but at least the water's really flat. So when they get around the weather mark, even if it's a little light, you can see the breeze just laying down. It's getting a little streaky. There might be even a little bit of current difference here. So it's getting really tricky. Look for some big change-ups as we get to the top of this course.
Yes. So as we come into this top mark, it's brought to you by Ford Whip. Go faster on the water. These guys have been so supportive and giving the class some money, so they are sponsoring this mark rounding.
Yeah, big pressure on and off at the top of the course. It looks like it's pretty gusty. You can see the darker patches on the water of more pressure, more wind speed. Not on ley line, so there was a tack there. Gee, tacks are expensive.
Peter, the delta here in speed now becomes pretty dramatic. It's a couple knots, even in straight line speed in this breeze.
And seeing a little bit of a wind shift, you can see that dark patch just on the top of your screen. That is starting to favour those boats that are on the starboard ley line. They're getting stronger and stronger on the fleet. They're going to come in all at one time, and it's going to be spicy.
Well, tacking's expensive. If you're not on ley line, effectively you're committed to two extra tacks in these things. You go pretty quickly, you get shot back into the centre of the pack. But there's the top mark, and it looks like it will be Santiago Langer, maybe.
Oh, no, the other team.
It's the other team. It's the wrong one.
Mateo.
So it is the second Argentinian team that are up to... They've had a good windward beat.
And also the second Austrian team as well, Farzed and Zoldig. They have had an absolute ripper of an upwind. They're coming in good shape as well in the centre of your screen there.
Yeah, Vittorio Bassaro and Mael Frescari, the Italians, they'll be really happy with this. They lost a lot of points to their teammate that they're competing against for selection. They don't know the selection criteria, so both Italian teams have to just try to win the regattas.
It's pretty tough going into a selection.
It is. We've talked to them about it. It's really, really challenging.
So it is Austria 391 around that top mark in first place, closely followed by Argentina 29. And then you've got the Italians, Italian 5, Bizzarro and Frescari. They are your third place team there.
It's really flat water, so that these teams, regardless of the breeze right now, should have no problems getting up on the foils, keeping the boat really level. Even look for some of the boats to have even a little bit of weather heel as they try that to just add a little bit more riding moment.
So these guys do have an offset mark to clear, and then they are safe to go downwind, and that's just a little safety marker out there. And you can see them, it's a fight now to get that boat up on the foils and get them sending downwind. And we haven't seen any early jibes here. These guys are just cruising down now on starboard jibe.
Like Peter said, even the tacks are really costly in this light air. If you come off the foils, you could have to be searching and heading up and closer to the breeze, losing so many boat lengths to try to get up foiling again after a bad jibe. I don't think this is the breeze where they can do fully foiling jibes, which are hard anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty hard without a lot more adjustment, but just real highlight to look is the role of the crew or the forward hand. They move forward and aft in the boat to actually change the angle of the tack of the foil, because the course adjustment on the foil is a little bit unsophisticated, so it's actually quicker for the forward hand, but it's added a whole different dimension, hasn't it, in terms of athleticism and flexibility of the forward hand to, and we're looking here at the New Zealand boat.
We were talking to, beforehand, we were talking to Jason Waterhouse and Lisa Darmanin, and they were saying, Jason started sailing in like Hobie 16s and stuff, and the two of them have been sailing catamarans for an awful long time. So even though we didn't have hydrofoiling catamarans, back in the 90s or early 2000s when they were starting out, there's this sensation, there's this ability to feel a boat when you're on two hulls and way off the center line of the boat. That someone like Lisa Darmanin has a really good feel for these boats. They've made a nice transition into the class.
These guys are going between 15 and 16 knots on this downwind, which is incredible considering we're reading about 11 knots of wind speed. So you can see them absolutely flying. Great shot there of Denmark 71. You can see there the crew walking forwards and backwards on that side hull. So they're pretty much controlling the ride height of this boat, and they're really the accelerator of these boats on this downwind. The first boat to make a break was Argentina 29. They did make a jibe at that top third point of that downwind, and it's looking like the boats are starting to follow suit there and jibe back into that bottom mark.
So boats heading down towards Mark 2. It is Argentina in the lead from Austria, and the current world champions, Bizzarro and Friscari, in third position. Jason Waterhouse is up there in fifth, so he's in with a shot. Senholt and Lubeck in eighth. A few of the familiar names are starting to push up towards the leaderboard, but there's a couple of outsiders there, certainly in first and second. Probably the less favoured teams for both Argentina and Austria. Enjoying the conditions here in Geelong.
Is Lisa Darmanin's brother in this fleet?
Yes, absolutely. Paul Darmanin. Mm-hmm. And he's actually having quite a good race at the moment as well, right up there. And that's with his crew, Lucy Copeland.
Here we have the New Zealand team a little bit concerned about the photo boat getting a little too close. Hopefully they didn't make them jibe away too early. But these sailors, they're so precise. They care about absolutely everything. So if there's any bit of chop created by anything unnecessarily, they're really upset about it.
So that was Gemma Jones and Josh Porebski. Gemma Jones was the New Zealand representative, got fourth at the Olympic Games in Rio.
I believe she won the medal race, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
She's got a fight on her hands because there's a whole bunch of other New Zealanders, like a lot of countries, that are fighting for country selection to represent their country at Tokyo. And Gemma Jones and Josh Porebski are right in a battle for New Zealand selection, as are the Australians with Nathan Outridge and his sister. And Jason Waterhouse. It's game on, isn't it? Down under.
And they've both got their strengths and weaknesses in different conditions, so it's really going to come down to the selection panel choosing the combination that they prefer. But I am sure this result is going to be a big help into becoming that selected team.
It looks like there's a big separation now on this downwind leg. Things are just starting to spread out. There's a big pack behind the top five that's probably going to come into that leeward gate all at once. So that's going to be an opportunity. Some people come around that leeward mark and keep their kite up a little bit and go around the group. and don't take it down early and do the pinwheel around with everyone else. But let's see who makes a big jump around the leeward mark.
And the biggest mover in the fleet so far has been Waterhouse and Darmenin, Australia 2. They were in about 15th leading into that top mark, managed to clear out with good air, and they've now worked their way into second place. So they are just following Argentina 29 into this bottom mark, which is a huge... They've really sailed right through the fleet, and we know these guys have good boat speed. They've just got to stay out of trouble.
Very good boat. And for me, what's the highlight there by Waterhouse and Darmenin is their course management in terms of finding a lane, making sure that they're in phase with the little pressure variations. And of course, we know that Waterhouse always quick downwind.
He is. They've got, as you said, they've had so much experience sailing together in multi-holes that they can do it with their eyes shut, those two together.
So the first boat's round the bottom mark, and bottom mark gate option, left or right. You've got, this is a passing opportunity, certainly if the boats are compressed, but it's Argentina in the lead, then it will be Australia second, then it's close with the USA coming in next, with right on there, Bizarro's in there, and Senholt and Lubeck.
Yeah, it's nice to see Lynn Senholt and CP Lubeck up. We interviewed them yesterday. They haven't been having a great regatta. They were one of the people that literally got, quotes, stuck in the weeds. And we had a great interview with them yesterday because CP got one of the first really bad leg injuries from falling off these boats, and the class association is working on a whole bunch of things to keep, safety a priority in these classes, including maybe changing the rudders to make them more safe if you fall off.
Yeah, those guys are currently in 16th position overall,
yeah,
but
they
won the silver medal, a few months ago in Auckland with the 2019 World. So I'm sure they're waiting to stamp their mark on this fleet for the Gold Fleet Racing.
Originally people thought when this class was selected that it would have more men in the front of the boat doing what seemed to be the harder job, and women in the back of the boat. But what we noticed is the experience of sailing high-performance boats still tipped the scales onto the male side, but now we're just starting to see more and more female helms. It's a growing trend, which is kind of what they expected eventually. They thought it would happen a little bit earlier, but we realized that there just weren't as many opportunities for women to sail high-performance boats. So they selected sometimes the men over the women to steer, and now that's starting to transition with more experience.
Which is why it's so good to see females like Lynn and Gemma Jones as well from New Zealand. These guys are really moving through the fleet. They're learning those lessons, and it's really cool to see the girls step up in that helming role. Just a quick note, this second Upwind is brought to you by McGlide Boat Wraps. You don't have to ever anti-foul your boat again. So sign up for more at 49er.org/wrap.
Sounds like a good product. What a good idea. Saves a hell of a lot of blood, sweat and tears on the boat ramp, doesn't it?
Isn't anti-foul awful?
Have a look at the product. It must say I'm impressed.
This second leg is where things start to settle down, it seems. There usually aren't a lot of big moves, right, Peter?
Well, it's about getting in phase with the breeze and trying to minimise how many manoeuvres you do, because the leading boat, if they can force the trailing boats or someone you want to beat to do 2 extra tacks, and we saw how powerful that was at that top mark. Once they got into that top mark zone, the boats that had to do that were not on ley line, it was very costly, those late tacks, especially in the multi-hulls.
Right, so that can happen on any part of the beat.
Yeah, finding a lane that you're happy that you're not being affected by the wind flow coming off the trailing edge of the mainsail. And the rule of thumb, it's wind flow is affected about 10 mast heights. So it's a long way that the wind shadowing effect, if it's coming off the leach of a mainsail, that it projects out the back.
They've been on port tack for a long time in the beginning of this beat. So we're almost a third of the way through this beat now, at least for the leaders. And that's a long port, so it just tells us that that left is hanging in there. In the last couple days, that's what we've heard.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of pattern emerging, isn't it? That and again illustrated by high performance, that pick the favoured side and minimise your tacks and control the game. It's pretty hard for trailing boats to come through.
Now, it's a little bit different with these high-performance boats. Peter, you're really familiar with the Star Class and the Star Sailor series. When a shift comes through a Star fleet, no matter where you are, everyone tacks at the same time. You just have to. Why is it a little bit different in the multi-hulls, you think?
Just manoeuvrability. I mean, the VMG loss, or the loss of when you're doing, what are they doing upwind there at the moment? Can we pull that
Yeah,
up?
10 knots.
10 knots, and
currently.
you go down to 2 or 3 knots if you tack. So that's a huge loss. Whereas in a starboat or even sailing your laser, a tack doesn't really cost you not a lot. You know, the downside is far outweighed by getting in phase and wind shift. So it's a different style of racing.
So I thought it'd be a good time to check in with our on-water commentator, Olivia Price. She's out there. Olivia, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's happening with the conditions out there?
Yeah, hi guys. It's really up and down here on the racecourse here in Geelong. We've got a lot of up pressure, about 12 knots, but down pressure is well below 7. So it really is a tricky racecourse out here with patches of wind everywhere, and it's about staying out of those big holes so they're keeping their high average speed rather than just high top speed.
Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, it is. You don't quite get that depth of knowledge with looking from on the screen with what's happening with the conditions out here. It's been interesting. You said that left-hand side. We saw a lot of the teams on port tack there, sending it out to that side. But now we've gone back to about 50-50, as we can see the Argentinians there make that tack over onto starboard. So these guys are just playing the little lifts and knocks that are happening up along this course, but it's spread out. You know, these leaders are coming into that top mark very rapidly on that shot there, so they've got one more tack to get themselves into that top mark, and then they will be in. You know, it's really spread the fleet out.
It's good to see that, you know, it's normal kind of really high performance racing, which is as long as you can stay on that tack, that lifted tack for as long as you can. The people who can hang there the longest are the ones, almost no matter what, that stay on top. Even if they have to eat a little bit of a header coming back to the other side of the course, they've been sailing less distance for an awful long period of time, and we're seeing that with that top group. Now there are some boats that are on the left side that kind of hipped up on that lead group, and now we should start to see a little bit of a mix-up in probably like the bottom of the top 10 and the lower teens, because there were some boats that paid early to get into that left, and there's just still looks like a little bit of good pressure over there.
And we've got a few of our high performers right at the moment in that top group that are a little bit further down the leaderboard. Outeridge and Outeridge, they are in 12th place at the moment, and GBR, our race leaders, are in 22nd. So we've got to keep an eye on these guys to see how much damage control they can do, if they can work their way through the fleet and try to post a better result, because every race counts. You know, there are very little drops in this series, and so it's not so much about putting those great races together, but also about that damage control for the races that don't quite go your way.
Well, and you know, managing the scoreboard.
Yeah.
It's not realistic to have a great race every race, but if you get a bit deep, as right now overall leaders, you know, John Gimston is back. How good can they recover from that, from a very deep position to a strong position, or as we'd term it, a keeper in the overall picture in terms of the mass of the regatta?
We've got Jason Waterhouse and Lisa Dummin, and they're rounding that top mark. You can see how strong our girl crews are getting. Like, that kite gets up really quite quickly, then they've got to quickly grab a hold of that sheet. We've got a jibe there. How interesting.
And it's
or not.
No.
Oh, no.
Might have had a little bit of a mare there at the top mark.
And then let's keep an eye on the finish. They won the last race of yesterday, and they have come on and off and featuring in international regattas, but you know, usually when you win a race, you come back the next day, no matter, even if the breeze is different than the day before, and you come back with a significant amount of confidence, and they're obviously bringing that through right now. But what a lead Waterhouse and Darmanin have, or actually the second. Yeah, actually there's a big gap. There's a big gap between first and second. I thought they were in the lead.
But the first two boats have really stepped away, and next it'll be Kirk Bay.
Yep.
From Finland.
Wow, big separation. That all happened at the top of that beat. Those top two boats were on port tack forever, and everyone else just had to deal with each other in the back of the fleet trying to find little bits of air.
Then we've got Newberry and Linenberg coming around in 4th place, and New Zealand for Jones and Porebski. They've had a really good consolidation of that race. and also Denmark, Linsen Holt and CP Lupek, they're down in 7th now. So these are the teams that have worked their way through the fleet. You're also seeing Bizzaro and Franskari in 8th place there, and Wilkinson and Dawson, they're having a really great event. New Zealand 96, they're in 9th place.
And it looks like you can see Breeze further down the course. That's why they're not jibing. Maybe that was a last-minute thing with Waterhouse and Darmanin where they were just going into a jibe and they looked ahead and they maybe realized that there's no need to turn. We just saw a couple boats, maybe the in 9th, 10th jibe away, but the leaders are still just sending it down on starboard tack still, which makes us think that that still left shift is in phase, or it certainly hasn't changed enough to make them want to jibe.
Yeah, I think it might be pressure.
Yeah,
Over the
Breeze.
course, and there's big holes. You can see the glassy patches on the water, and if you fall into one of those, it's just like being like locked up in jail. So it's very pressure dependent out here in this first race of the Nacra 17 Gold Fleet.
And I guarantee you about a year or two ago in the early days and we're still in early days of having a foiling Nacra, but I bet you they weren't able to plane as early 2 years ago as they are now.
Foil.
To foil, sorry.
Yeah. Look at him fly.
Of course.
And the full control, I think, just the people now are really starting to get to grips with the dynamic of foiling and where you need to have your rudder elevator and the ability for the crew to keep the boat energised on the foil is so important. First two boats absolutely launched, so they're gone.
Yeah, and they've had a great little stint on port tack. They're just centering themselves in the course there, and that just reduces the risk, right? These guys are starting to jibe off, but they've got both sides of the fleet kind of in control. However the wind goes, if you're in that more in the centre of the course, you can absorb a shift from any side.
Waterhouse is quick downwind again. Waterhouse and Darmanin, who are second, have had a very strong downwind, although I think they're going to run out of racetrack.
The Argentinians, their training partner is, they've probably spent a lot of time with Santiago Langa and Cecilia, and those guys are the world champions.
The biggest movers here in this fleet downwind has definitely been Bizzaro and Franskari and Waterhouse and Darmanin, and you can see their experience there. As Argentina crossed the finish line, these guys just managed to hold those teams off. What a great race for these guys. Probably the second in line team for Argentina, just showing them the rest of the world what they're made of.
Second over the line, it will be Waterhouse and Darmanin, and they are a long way ahead of third, so that's definitely a keeper. A good start for Jason Waterhouse, trying to really put his hand up for Olympic selection. I'm sure that hasn't gone unnoticed by the Australian the Nacra 17 selectors. Had a very good regatta in Auckland, Waterhouse. He came out of that one in third overall at the last Worlds.
And it's Italy 5 that's made the biggest move on this downwind, really showing that they have the legs. Bizzaro and Franskari, they've worked their way into third place, so that's a jump of about 3 positions for those guys. They are quick.
They were deep at the top mark, and again, when you look at the overall, I always tend to look at the boats that are moving through the fleet, and you would expect Bizzaro and Franskari to come through. And it's the downwind flyers, isn't it? We've seen it from Waterhouse and Darmanin now, and Bizzaro and Franskari are showing very good downwind pace.
And they've just crossed the line there, so that will secure third place for them. And a real fight here between USA 50 and Finland 501. I can't pick it. Can you guys? What a finish there.
I think USA just got there by half a length.
Another big mover on this downwind has been Outeridge and Outeridge. They've made their way up into 8th position here, so they're really fighting in that pack at the top of your screen. They're coming into the finish, and as we said, every point counts for these guys. It's not their best result, but they are in second overall, so they're really trying to minimise as much damage as possible.
And the Kiwis, Michael Wilkinson and his crew, they came up through the fleet quite quickly too. They kind of flip-flop with his other New Zealand compatriots.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there might have been a bit of a data issue there. So that was Micah Wilkinson and Erica Dawson have come through.
Yep.
Closely followed by Lynn Sentholt and CP Lubeck crossing your screen, and with the Austrian team of Faresi and Zoltig. And again, the Austrians just behind them with Zajac and Mats. Really tight finishing here, especially in that middle pack. It will be Outeridge and Outeridge crossing in next. and USA, Parent and Atwood also in there.
They're followed by Jones and Prepsky, and then Santiago Langer and Carranza. They come through in 13th.
So it's a good time to mention here, the sailors are really trying to give back to some Australians that have been devastated by the recent bushfires, and this is quite close to my heart as well. So many of our farmers and people more in the country have just been suffering over the past few months, and so we've organised a fundraiser and a raffle that's available. So if you do want to check it out to go and donate, you can do that at 49er.org/donate, or you will be able to find these links on our Facebook page. So if you can donate any amount of money that you can, not only will you be helping those in need, but you'll also go in the draw to win some pretty cool prizes that we've got up for grabs with a raffle that we'll be drawing live later on today.
Great cause. Certainly the bushfires have just been so sad to see so many good people affected by huge bushfires that you had. I live in New Zealand, and we even had the smoke come across all the way across the Tasman, and some very dark afternoons affected by the Australian bushfires. So great cause.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have the normal big pack that finishes in the middle. Now we have the back of the pack. The Oceania champions, Gibbs and Weiss from the United States. Really not that great of a race. It's always interesting to find out if it's just the fleet's so good that sometimes you just get stuck in the back. I mean, it's just so deep.
Yeah, and this fleet is huge. We've got a 34 boat strong fleet here, and that is difficult racing. Having all of these top boats on one start line can be difficult. As you can see, the preliminary results loaded up there on your top left-hand screen. But you get in that second row off the start line, and you have to be a superstar to work your way through this fleet.
And it's really like the Olympic Games. Actually, sometimes people say these World Championships are harder than the Olympic Games, right? Because you can only send one.
Yeah, they are, because the fleets are so big.
Right.
You go to the Games, there's one rep per nation, and you look at through here, and you're seeing multiple very, very good crews from one country, Australia, and we've just seen it very graphically with the Argentinian so-called second team coming up and taking a race. So the Olympic Games is a different animal. I think the psychological game is at the Olympic Games. This here is about being fast and being very strategic, how you manage the fleet.
Right.